Roger Bloor is a retired senior lecturer and consultant in addiction psychiatry. He comes from a North Staffordshire family and lives in Newcastle under Lyme. He has an MA in poetry writing from Newcastle University through the Poetry School in London. Having twice been commended in the Hippocrates Prize competition, Roger has won second place in it this year. In 2019, he was shortlisted in the Poetry on Loan competition and the Hedgehog Dialect pamphlet competition, and the same year he was longlisted in the Ginkgo Prize. His pamphlet, A Less Clear Dream, was shortlisted for the Arnold Bennett Book Prize in 2018, and his long poem pamphlet, Al Yedesle, was shortlisted for the Arnold Bennett Book Prize in 2019. Also in 2019, he was the winner of the Poetry London Claw Prize. Roger has performed his poets at various venues in London and throughout the British Isles. He was poet in residence 2018 to 19 at the historic Perfume Gardens in Staffordshire. He's a member of the Ganada Water Poetry Group and has organised open mic sessions and workshops in Newcastle and at Keele University, in addition to coordinating the Newcastle Stanza Group. He has coordinated an anthology of poems for medical students, which he did in 2019, and that's given to all first-year medical students at Keele University. Roger is the owner and sole employee of Clayhanger Press, which focuses on publishing poetry by local authors and poetry about the area where he lives. In addition, he handprints and binds limited editions of poetry. With Vanessa Lampert and Mary Mulholland, he co-edits the Alchemy Spoon Poetry magazine, which he publishes through Clayhanger Press, and that is the best magazine I've seen online. It is so beautiful. So, thank you. Without any more from me, I'm going to hand over to Roger. And Roger, would you like to read to us, please?
Thank you very much, Janice, for the generous introduction. I'm going to read not exactly in the order of the collection, because I think sometimes when you read, poems come together better in voice and a different order than they do on the page. Many of my poems are written about personal history and geography, two subjects I paid little attention to in school, but more recently I've discovered the joy of history, and particularly of exploring individual histories and of personal histories. So the first few poems I'm going to read are perhaps from about personal history and things which have occurred, which have stuck in my mind. That year, high in the wood, where the pipistrelles fly, we placed a nesting box, old timber roughly cut, a narrow entrance slit and space to roost. I held the ladder tight against the oak, one foot against the bottom rung, the other firm against the earth. He climbed, fixing it northeast facing above the clefted bough, but hanging looser than he liked, worried it might shift in the winds that came that autumn. Safe on the ground, he stood back, considered and packed his tools. As we carried the ladder home, he said, "The tree will grow into it." We took the sloping path down towards the house and left the wood to nurse its newfound care. The next one, stacking winter wood. I think sometimes when you try and recall memories from the past, you get competing memories and things which don't actually, which seem to clash with each other, and ones you didn't expect to come back again. And sometimes that creates, I think, an unease in your memory of what has happened. Stacking winter wood. The journey from the wood store back to tree is not a road to take at night. There are some things that do not sit together well. There is a track that leads up from the desert to the snow, to where the giant redwoods raised on fire and ice stand and wait. There are some things that do not fit together well. The ashwood logs seek out a hollow drop and slot at rest. But in the gaps, the cutwood loneness echoes tree. There are some things that do not fit together well. Some years ago, I used to paint a lot, and like one of the other local artists, Arthur Berry, who was far more famous than I am as an artist, I decided for some bizarre reason to burn all the artwork that I'd ever made and start again. Arthur Berry did that, and then people rescued them from the tip and made a fortune selling them. Nobody bothered to rescue mine. Savonarola reborn. There were oils and acrylics, watercolors and sketches. And if you ask me why 20 years ago I set fire to them, threw them on a bonfire, all the artworks I ever made, I probably wouldn't tell you. I could perhaps try to offer some suggestions. I was bored with them. They'd run their course. They were from my blue period. The primitiveness was too obvious, or I'd moved on. I did keep two of them. If you ask me why 20 years ago, those two, I most probably, even possibly, wouldn't tell you. I could perhaps try to offer some suggestions as to why I kept them. They were in good frames. They were nearly prize-winning works. They held memories. They were the two I liked best, the portraits of her. But if I'm honest, she loved all my paintings apart from those two. So I saved those two, and all the rest I burned. One of the hobbies of poets, I think, is looking at pictures and reinterpreting pictures and trying to produce images that reflect their feelings about that picture. And those sort of ekphrastic poems I do really enjoy. And this next one is taken from a brilliant weekend we had with Tammy Yoseloff in Margate on a poetry writing weekend, where she took us to the Turner Gallery, and we looked at the most bizarre combinations of artists I can think of. It was Turner, Tracy Emin, and John Davis's massive lifelike sculptures. It produced some very interesting poems, as I recall. This may or may not be one of them. And this is about John Davis's The Dearson series, which are enormous life-size scarecrows queued up. The Dearson series. The bus for the hospital departs from stand 13, weaves through the town and stops just outside the A&E. The queue today is longer than normal, is less normal than usual. The regulars are there, the frequent flyers, the halt, the drunk, the lame. And this week, the 5 scarecrows are back. Strictly speaking, they are beyond help, beyond dead. Do you want to tell them? I thought not. Surely the one in the body bag must know. And the smell from the one in the rotting bandage is certainly a cue. The smell of death is rarely wrong. But still they stand and chat unsteadily, hats at an angle, their eyes fixed forward on the future, never looking right or left, avoiding the sight of death, existing happily in that narrow focus of life that death's periphery surrounds. And artists spend a lot of time trying to replicate nature, but unfortunately nature doesn't always cooperate. Monet tried to paint one of his pictures with the sun in the right place, and the sun kept on moving very irresponsibly. This is Sunlight Effect after painting the same name by Monet. There must have been a voice, however soft, that in the darkness of the space somewhere between the dream and world would whisper, move the evening sun to center stage. But Monet's still unconquered sun, resisting siren call, moves where it will, and so the artist waits to paint the scene once more, and holding truth in balance, weighs the worth of beauty less. The other hobby of poets is people watching. It produces an enormous number of poems. Allegedly, you can tell a psychiatrist at a striptease show because he's watching the audience, not the performer. That may be apocryphal. So here's just a couple of people watching poems. Dessert. I doubt that she had ever seen a Chinese restaurant chocolate-domed ice cream before. A spoon poised just above the rock-hard pleasure dome of novelty and taste, she shouts across the table at her children. middle-aged, a daughter and 2 sons. You see your children as small versions of yourself. Wait to see what sort of mess they make of their lives. I raised 3 villains, no jobs, no backbone. At least at breakfast time, I don't look across the table watching someone wait to die. She tapped the chocolate dome and watched it crack and fall. The University Bookshop at Keele is a brilliant place to sit because the coffee area is so small you can't help but overhear conversations. And a bit like Alan Bennett's mother, who felt she didn't deserve to be in hotels but sat in the hotel lobby and made up stories about the people in there. It's fun to make up stories about the people in the Keele University Bookshop. Defences. They met over coffee at Waterstones. Old school friends catching up. 60s kids, 50 years on. He'd lost his hair, she'd had hers tinted. They talk of all the books they weren't allowed to read. Forever Amber, Peyton Place, Lady Chatterley, page 26. The Perfume Garden, My Life and Loves. Said to be a little racy, he whispers confidentially. The river burst its banks that night, overflowed the barriers, flooded their lives, to leave a lasting mark of where it once had been. They laugh and check their watches, button up their coats, walk out together into driving rain. And sometimes it's not the conversations, it's the silence that produces the poem or the insight into what's happening, but often a puzzling silence. And this was written in a hotel in Newcastle on Tyne when I was last there. Table for one. In the shadow of the Morden Tower, she dines alone. She dines alone. The king of diamonds placed face up beneath her knife. She orders food and wine, while 2 stone lions guard the Chinese gate beneath the shadow of the Morden Tower. She dines alone, then walks away, and leaves the king face up beneath her knife. And the final one is, again, just a very short one, which expresses, I think, the interest there is in just watching someone and not having any sound to it. The next table. I knew right away the bread roll was not for him. As soon as he spread the butter on, I knew it was for her. You spread butter differently for someone you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. That was great. That poem about destroying all your paintings got to me because I was originally a painter, and I'm terrible. You know, I keep records of everything. I don't paint anymore. They're all digital now and in the shed. Anyway, they were lovely. You do have a good insight into paintings and what you can do with them. So now we're going to hear from one of your guests, Vanessa Lampert. Vanessa was a classmate of Roger's on the MA programme at Poetry School London and Newcastle University. Since graduating, she's won the Cafe Writers and Edward Corston Thomas prizes and the Ver Poetry Prize twice. She's been commended in the Bridport Prize and the Troubadour Prize twice, and she was commended in the National Poetry Competition this year. Vanessa's work has been widely published, most recently in Magma, The Moth, The Oxford Times, and Poetry News. She co-edits The Alchemy Spoon and teaches on the Learn with Leaders programme in India. She also runs workshops for Hive Young Poets in South Yorkshire. Her pamphlet, On Long Loan, is published by Live Canon. Her first full collection is due to be published later this year. Vanessa is from Wallingford in Oxfordshire, and she works as an acupuncturist. So let's hear from you, please, Vanessa.
Thank you. My Negronis arrived. And I wanted to say that when Mary and Roger and I are communicating on WhatsApp about the magazine, we're amused. Mary and I are very amused that Roger's name always gets changed. And so he's been Ron Roy, Rob, but my personal favourite, I would like to toast him with, cheers, Tiger. And it's a great honour to read at your launch. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've got a couple of poems about summer because apparently it's going on at the moment. The first one is a poem I've written really recently called Limpet. I tried so hard to wrench you off a rock, and who could blame me? I was only a barefoot child, only hell-bent on control. All I wanted was to see beneath your roof, small apology for nothing, little muscle in a hill. Stubborn boarded up building made for a life that wouldn't budge. And what of all my surreptitious wrenching? Perhaps I was ashamed to want to plunder your dark room, quiet companion of the ocean, quite content to be alone. I was seen, of course, and mocked as children are. I guess I stood corrected. After, only collected up your dishes and took them home. Caramel inside a shell, sealed cubicle of wet, salty living thing that told me no. And my second poem is also about being a child on a beach. I live a really long way away from the sea, so it has still the same kind of magic for me as it ever did. And so lots of my poems contain beaches. Sand. On Willacombe Beach, my grandpa builds an MG convertible sports car from sand in front of the swing boats where I was sick once. My car faces the wind-ruffled sea, roof down, under a sky made from torn strips of paper. Grandpa slowly carves the bonnet and makes me a member of the AA. He shapes the wheels and stands back, proud as a car salesman. Other kids are staring. They want to be me. In a few weeks, my parents will separate, but now our orange windbreak holds them close together in flowery beach chairs, safe from the wind. I sit behind the steering wheel of my new MG. The engine starts first try. I take her out for a spin to Lundy Island to see the puffins and the granite stacks and back, beeping my horn to warn the surfers who wave. I park her where she was before, facing out to sea. Mum looks up from her book and says, "It must be time for a 99. I want to jump on my car before we leave and ruin her, so no one else can ruin her. But Grandpa won't let me. He takes my hand in his, saying, 'Don't look back, let's go.'" And I've got a couple of poems that I wrote on the MA, and they were in my final portfolio, and they made it into my pamphlet. And I asked Roger if there was anything in particular that he would like me to read, and he chose this poem called "O Jossers We," and a josser is a circus word, a circus folk word for people who are non-circus folk. So here it is, "O Jossers We." Here come the circus folk, self-assured, lithe, justifying summer with their thighs. They're lighting up the village green like blossom, retro chic and velvety, juggling old cutlery, qualmless and oblivious to cold. See them expertly erecting their marquees, pirouetting, irresistible to doves. I almost ran away to join them way back when. I had core strength and was not shunned by ponies. Oh, just as we who have not clung to the trapeze, nor held aloft a woman on one hand, we who failed to sail through air while smiling wildly, now must witness all this fearless allure. See them safe inside their neon painted spandex, shiny as a shoal of jubilant fish. If this be a dream, then hide the truth from me. There are so many lovely things we can never hold or keep. I won't be a girl again, nor ever you a boy. Still they come to mingle amongst us, jeopardy and tumbling, hula hooping, reaping what they sow. Oh, come again, restore us, hang by your teeth and spin for us, for we have loved you longer than our lives. And finally, this poem is for Greta, and it's a story of a hen that is rescued from a factory farm. Song of the Rescued Hen. And once I was the egg laid for my deliverance, and to peck was the shape of my devotion dance. And I stepped from my broken cradle into bright, and they took me to the place of proximity and light. And I laid and was wretched, and I laid, and I wrenched all the feathers from my breastbone in that cage. And all horror was my sorrow, and I laid, and was derelict and broken, blinded framework of dismay. And I laid till it was over, and they took me to the dust, and I scratched beneath the sky that gives me darkness, and I roost. And the rain is my solace, falling silent through the wind, and its crystals soft and precious as they break across my wings. And I stand beneath its balm, to be healed, to be strong, and this will be my freedom, and I shall be its song.
Oh, that last one is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vanessa. And now we're going to continue with Roger. Roger, would you like to unmute and read for us again?
Thanks, Janice, and thank you, Vanessa. I enjoyed those. So, as I said, I never paid attention to history at school, but it's a fascinating area to write poems about. And particularly, I'm interested in the voiceless people from history, the people who the great history tomes ignore because they're only part of the scene, where actually they are the scene, they're the essence of what happens. There's two lines from G.K. Chesterton's poem, The Secret People. It's the last two couplets, probably the best two couplets. Actually, probably the rest of it's not much good. The last two couplets were very good. The last couplet was very good. And it says, "We are the people of England, and we have not spoken yet. Smile at us, pay us, pass us, but do not quite forget." And I think it's important because in the grand spread of history, we forget the people, the individuals who didn't have voices, either because of their social status or because of the way history is written ignores them. So these are a few poems that look at the individuals within some stories from history. The first ones comes from one of my, apart from Newcastle under Lyme and Staffordshire, one of my favourite places, which is the Isle of Man, where my daughter lives. So she's responsible for taking me to this place and triggering this poem. December the 20th, 1857. A wildness of place draws tight around Niarbyl Bay tonight, driven down from South Barrule through tight clawed crees, stooped back to sea, stood hard to stone wall lanes that lead to waiting shore. Off Niarbyl Point, the Earl of Carrick, iron screw steamer, 300 tons, 14 crew, 2 passengers out of air for Liverpool, heading south-southwest. Ahead, the lights of Calf of Man grasp briefly through the spray and roll. A lee shore sighted close, helm hard a port, engines stopped. Pushed back to rocks and stove in two, she breaks in sight of shore. From the bay we watch them plucked by 2s and 3s to seas so high our boats can neither reach nor save. Just two survived to grasp our ropes and struggle to the beach. And on the next day tide, the body of the stewardess, a fine young woman of 24, clothed only in her petticoat, will wash ashore. The ship and cargo well insured. Miss Cameron is not. We tend to think of scams, internet scams, the things which have proliferated during this current pandemic as being things, new things. Scams, people getting money from gullible people probably started as soon as we got onto two legs and started to use language, I would guess. And this is about a scam, which I think is a really good one, but unfortunately she got caught in 1832. Sarah Roxburgh sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment for witchcraft and robbery, Friday the 17th of October, 1823. I told the stupid bitch that if she tucked between her breasts 25 £1 notes and lit the fire in the upstairs parlour room, then all bad debts would be repaid. I told the stupid bitch to bring a lock of hair cut from her husband's head, 5 pins from out her sewing box, 2 pigeons freshly killed and plucked, 3 candles lit and ready to be pricked. I told the stupid bitch to place the notes on the chair and chant with me, 5 pens are melting on the fire, 2 pigeons bleeding on the floor, 3 candles lit and pricked. In the name of God, I defy the devil. I told the stupid bitch to watch the melting pins, and then through alchemy or sleight of hand, the pound notes changed themselves unseen to worthless paper strips. I bade the stupid fitch farewell and left, with all her money tucked between my breasts, enough to pay off all my debts and more. Around 1740, 1750, a large part of the country was starving through a variety of causes, and that was true of here in Staffordshire. And in 1783, the population of Etruria heard that a canal boat was going through the canal, which runs through Etruria, up to Liverpool, filled with bread, which was supposed to be sold in Etruria, but the owners had decided they'd get more money from selling it in Liverpool, and so it was going to bypass them. And so they hijacked the boat and tried to get the bread out. The official history of this is written from the point of view of the magistrates and the soldiers who were present. This is an individual history. Paul Barlow, 1745 to 1783. They say 2 marks were left to teach the starving crowds the foolishness of riot and unrest, a warning to those deluded people who daringly assembled in defiance of the law. The splintered wood above the door of the Etruria Inn, where a musket ball missed by a hair the magistrate's top hat. The reddened wheel around my broken neck left by the gallows rope on Monday last, outside the gates of Stafford Jail. They say 2 marks were left to teach the starving crowds the foolishness of riot and unrest. I say 6 more were left, my widow and 5 children. We have our very own witches here in Newcastle. I'm not sure if they still exist, but they did. And Molly Lee is a very famous local witch who's buried in St. John's Church in Burslem. And you can go and see her grave, and you can see what happened to her grave after she was buried because people were scared she was a witch. She was accused of being a witch, but was never tried, so never had a voice. And this is to give Molly Lee the voice she should have had. The ghost of Molly Lee pleads, yes, cries for exemplary justice against the arbitrary, unexampled injustice of her accusers. Question the first: by which devils are the operations of incubus and succubus practiced? Even if my blackbird sat above the Turk's Head sign and soured the brew and even spat in Parson Spencer's beer, does that make Molly Lee a witch to float as froth upon the sea? Weight and measure sold I never, milk and water sold I ever. Question the second: the enormity of witches is considered, and the whole matter set forth and declared. Even if my hawthorn never flowers, 20 shillings shall be paid to Alice Beach upon my death to buy fresh bread for widows and the parish poor. Does that make Molly Lee a witch, pie-wacket, pecking and greedy gut? Molly Lee, chase me round your apple tree. Question the fifth, whether witches can sway the minds of men to love or hatred. Even if 6 clerics damn my soul and children dance around my grave, when I come back 2 centuries hence as Sybil Leek, the Staffordshire seer, a blackbird sitting on my arm, will that make Molly Lee a witch, accounted guilty of that crime? Spells and curses made I never, but damn the parson's soul forever. The First World War clearly had an impact here and over all of the country. And these are just a couple of poems that look at the casualties of the First World War, who are often commemorated on local plaques, but if they died overseas, sometimes aren't. And this is from panel number 34 in Basra, from a soldier who died in 1917, who was local. Striding out up Road Heath rise, the dogs afield ahead, and on the wind chains drives down through the trees, backs down towards the farm, high over the ridge, carries news of war, scatters wild cherries red along his path to home. And just finally, these are 2 poems, which are Drastic Poems, responding to some photographs taken by my brother David, who's in the audience somewhere, who takes some excellent photographs and some really weird photographs. And these respond to some of the real weird, to 14 of the real weird photographs, and are part of a heroic crown. In fact, a homeless heroic crown who's looking for a publisher with a spare room, but that's another story. Engagement. With one last tender kiss before she sleeps, he turns and slowly leaves. She hears his footsteps fade down corridors and stairs, stirs and listens, the quiet click of door latch turns to distant echo of a sniper's single shot that pierces a creased and faded photograph. Her dull and sunken eyes look past the withered flowers towards a time before her days were worn away in dreams of death at Passchendaele. Endings. In dreams of death at Passchendaele, I see a single flower spring bloom across my khaki uniform. Hear steady wash of breaking winter waves at Hokum Bay. Taste salt of windswept autumn days above the Norfolk coast. Feel steady downward drag of summer mud-filled craters wrapping tight around my legs. Smell death beneath the sucking, sinking, grasping, coughing clay that molds my ageist mask of long abandoned hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely set. Thank you, Roger. Bloor, would you like to read again from Stacking Winter Wood? Thank you.
Thanks, Janice, and thank you, Mary, for an excellent set of poems. And I like the new one. I've not heard that. And before I start, I'd just really like to thank Dempsey and Whittle, Janice and Donald for all their patience and kindness and professionalism in helping to get Stacking Winter Wood into print. It's been a joy to work with the press. And also I thank Wendy French and Vanessa and Michael Hulse for the very kind words on the back. Michael's recovering from an operation, so can't be with us tonight, but he's going to watch the recording, he said. And also Mary and Vanessa for the excellent readings. I often feel that when we workshop things, one of our colleagues says that her poems are destined for the shredder. I often feel, compared with Mary and Vanessa's, mine have been to the shredder and back again, really, and got into the wrong order. But anyway, and also my poem. I've been writing poems for a long time, but my poetry writing changed dramatically with the MA through the poetry school, and that's thanks, I think, to both to the other poets who are on the course, but more specifically to Tammy Osloff and Lynn Maxwell, who was superb in helping me to try and look at the detail of poems and to work on them and revise them and get them to the best possible place, even though they are never finished. So thank you to all of those people. So I've just got a few poems to read at the end. I thought I don't often write, I haven't often written poems about my medical practice for a variety of reasons. Poetry is a good way of getting away from medical practice rather than writing about it. But this was one which sort of, I suppose, encapsulates the whole of my medical career in one short poem. And if I will read it to you, if you want to hear it read properly, then there's a beautiful video of Simon Callow reading it from the These Are the Hands publicity from the NHS anthology. He delivers it far better than I can. In all those years at medical school, they never told me that sitting with the dying was the human thing to do. I discovered that myself one night, behind the screens, around a bed at the end of the medical ward. They never told me that all the family would want was just for me to go upstairs and close her eyes and place the Bible in her hand. I discovered that myself one night in the bedroom of that terraced house. They never told me that 50 years later, I would still remember the name of the patient who died before we could stop his bleeding. I discovered that myself last night, awaking from a dream-filled, restless sleep. They never told me how easily I would shed that tear when a patient crossed the street to shake my hand and wish me well for my retirement. I discovered that myself today and thought that was a human thing for him to do. I do occasionally find a medical topic which is interesting medically, but then generates into a poem. This is one of them. The medical bit of it is during the start of the Industrial Revolution in the weaving industry. 36% of deaths of female textile workers were from tuberculosis, enormously high proportion. And the workers knew the reason for that. The owners knew the reason for that, but to change it would have cost them money. So they didn't, and those deaths continued. And the practice was the shuttle kiss. So when you're weaving, you have a shuttle and you got to get the thread through the eye. And what the weavers did was to suck it through the eye. It was the only way to get through. Then that shuttle would go on to somebody else who then sucked and the TB got passed. The cost of there were available automatic threaders. It was cheaper to dispense with people than to buy new machinery. So this is a poem about the shuttle kiss, but as I was writing, I realized that perhaps shuttle kiss could have a different meaning as well. So there's really sort of two halves to the poem. Shuttle kiss. I see my fingers spread across the cloth, feel heavy warmth of weaver's breath as parted lips enclose the hidden eye deep in the shadow of the folded arch. The shuttle death kiss thread pulls through, unwinding from the loaded pern that settles deep within the waiting walls to draw the weft across the waiting warp. I see his fingers spread across my thigh, feel heavy warmth of weaver's breath as parted lips enclose my hidden eye deep in the shadow of my folded arch. The thread of little death pulls through, unwinding from his ready shaft and settles deep within my walls to draw his weft into my waiting warp. And I was going to finish with a short one from the collection, but following a really interesting discussion on Tuesday evening with Janice and Donald about the importance of dialect, I've decided, as I can, I'll break the rules and read something that's not in the collection, but is in North Staffordshire dialect. This is the fifth of the sonnets to Orpheus in Rilke's collection, in Rilke's set, the sonnets to Orpheus. And it's translated, because I didn't pay attention to German either, and it's translated from a variety of English translations into where it should really be, which is North Staffordshire dialect. So this is Sonnet to Orpheus number 5. How'd Orpheus dunna need any headstone? Just go down the back garden and take a gander at his roses. That's the lad they used for know. He's everywhere, and they doesn't need for no out else. There ain't no good in chasing round looking for him. Just listen to the lads down the pump singing. That's where he is. And after all, when push comes to shove, they'll cadger last longer of these roses. There weren't out any of us could do about it. and I shouldn't think they were too chuffed either. They could always mather on about what he said, but in the end, he's buggered off and they stuck here while he's dying there playing his fiddle. In the end, they were doing what were right, even if it wanna. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much for doing that last one. Yes, we enjoyed all of them. That was very, very good. Listen, could everybody unmute and give everybody, all the readers, a good round of applause?